Aloha and welcome. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about particularly the cross-site scripting. We're looking at the chapter on application attacks. So the first one we deal with is cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting, it's known as XSS. It would have been called CSS, but CSS is already taken. It stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And if you've done any web programming or web page development, you'll know that yeah, HTML and CSS go hand in hand, so they couldn't reuse CSS in this sense. So they just use XSS. X is for cross, I guess. So cross-site scripting, it covers a number of different types of attacks. There's three main cross-site scripting attacks. One is the reflected cross-site scripting. It's also going to be called the non-persistent cross-site scripting or reflected XSS. Then you've got stored cross-site scripting, also known as persistent cross-site scripting or stored XSS. Then you've got the last one, which is DOM-based cross-site scripting or DOM-based XSS. And what that's doing is it's exploiting the document object model, the DOM. So let me go through the differences in these. So when you're looking at these, there's differences. Like the first one, the reflected XSS. That's the non-persistent one. This is the simplest and most common form of reflected cross-site script attack. And the way this works is the malicious script is delivered to the victim via usually an email or a social media message. And the attack payload, it's going to be reflected off the web server back onto the user browser. So the application takes input from the user's HTTP request, like a URL query parameter, and it immediately includes in the response page without sanitizing it. That's very important. The server has to be known not to sanitize the responses that it gets. So the server is never actually going to store this. You're just calling on a URL that has this malicious code in it. It's going to get reflected back to you. And when it's reflected back to you, it's going to come into the page that you see, and it will execute it by default. So an example of this is, let's say you have a search engine or a search page that displays a search term you entered, like let's say it's a vulnerablesite.com/search, and you've got a question mark with a Q equals query. What that means is it's looking for a parameter called Q that's going to be equal to this query. So what an attacker is going to do is they're going to have search question mark Q equals, then they'll have their it'll basically be JavaScript. It'll be the script tag and the script ending tag, and then in between it'll have JavaScript, the malicious JavaScript. So what's going to happen is you're calling to the website. The website is a search one. It's taking your term, and then it'll reflect it back and say, hey, we didn't find anything with, and it's going to put that, and when it displays it without actually sanitizing it, it's going to be injecting this script into the page that you get back from it, and then it will automatically execute at your end. So this is what's called a reflected attack, because what's happening is you've gotten a URL, usually in a phishing email, and you click on it, and it goes to that site and it reflects back to you the malicious code. So the second type is stored cross-site scripting, which also persistent. This one is a little bit different. So imagine you go to a website that has comment section on it, and you can put in comments or whatever you want in there, like a blog. So if you go to one of those sites and they weren't sanitizing everything, you could put in malicious JavaScript in there, and whenever somebody would go to that page, it would execute. So this is called stored or persistent cross-site scripting. And this is really bad because whoever goes to this page, it could possibly execute on their browser. And that can lead to other problems. So it can compromise it, because one of the things that they do, for example, let's say they injected some code and it said like script, and then it said document.location equals, and that when you do document.location equals, it's redirecting it to another site. So you can have it redirect to another site, and then you can have it execute some code on there, whether it's PHP or whatever the native backend language is. You can have it say cookie equals, and then they'll take a string there, and yeah, or not a string, but let's say that the cookie equals document.cookie. So what's going to happen is it'll go to that site, and which is the attacker's website, and it'll essentially grab the data that's found in the cookie. So this is used to steal information that they can use to go and hijack your session or things like that. And then the final type is the DOM-based XSS client side. And this is a little bit complicated, but the idea is in a DOM, you have different elements. So you have like the header element, you have all these different elements within your document structure. And what it's doing is it's programmatically setting some things in here. So example, imagine you had a client-side JavaScript on a page that's designed to personalize a greeting based on a URL parameter, which isn't a good idea to do, but just imagine you have a situation like that. You're going to get a URL and it's going to have like, question mark name equals your name. So what it can do is it can exploit that, and you can you can craft a URL that's going to exploit this client-side code and put in, instead of name, you'll use name, but you'll say name equals then image source X, and then on error equals alert, and whatever you want to alert. It's just if you're giving them alert and not really executing something dangerous. So what's going to happen is the victim on their browser is going to click on that link, and they're going to load the page that's mentioned there. And once they go to that page, the web server is going to send them the original HTML and the JavaScript. So the server's never actually going to see the stuff that was in your I guess the malicious content that you're sending there. It's just going to reflect that back to you. So then at the client side, what's going to happen is the vulnerable JavaScript reads the URL fragment, the part, like for our example, beyond the name, and then it tries to write the attacker's payload into the DOM element. So whatever DOM element we decided, let's say it was a greeting element or something like that, it would try to write it into there. And when it does that, it's gonna execute the malicious JavaScript that we sent with it. So this is not a good practice. So so DOM-based XSS client-side attacks, these are entirely not run at the server end. These are run entirely on the browser end. So that's what you need to keep in mind when you're studying through this. So you've got the three different types of attacks. You've got the reflected, you've got the stored, and you've got the reflected one is non-persistent. The stored is persistent, and you've got the DOM-based XSS client-side attacks. So just know the difference in these, and you'll be fine. If you have any questions about this, feel free to reach out. Aloha.